So welcome to our 5-step discussion today on how organisations have already or are becoming self-sufficient in the 5-step method. And I'd like to introduce our international panel. We've got Megan O'Leary, who was the development worker in Ireland for the National Family Support Network. And along with Sadie Grace, she was instrumental in setting up the 5-step method across Ireland. And Megan was also really instrumental in helping us develop the accreditation system. And then we've got Fionnuala O'Brien, who is the current training officer for the National Family Support Network. And we've now been working with Ireland for over 10 years. Moving on to Pauline Stewart. And Pauline is the executive officer and founder of Family Drug Support in New Zealand. And Pauline has the honour and the great achievement of being the quickest person ever to become an accredited practitioner, assessor and trainer. And indeed, she flew to Ireland to attend their training course. And we started working with Pauline in April 2019. And what she and her organisation have achieved is very inspiring. And welcome to Anita Ollemans, who from Jelinek. And Jelinek is the leading alcohol, drug and addiction agency in Holland. And we started working with Anita and their lead, Tamara de Bruin, who's the senior prevention worker, over 2 years ago. And Holland is an example of how we've worked with a country where English is not the first language. And that's led to some interesting challenges which we've overcome. And finally, welcome to Lorna Templeton, who's an independent research consultant. And Lorna's been working with Turning Point, training their staff in the 5-step method with Jan Larkin, who is the consultant clinical psychologist for Turning Point. And Turning Point are a leading social enterprise and work with people with drug and alcohol problems all across England. So I'm going to start with Megan and just find out from Megan about why they chose 5-step in Ireland and then how they developed the system. So over to Megan.
I think one of the first reasons, I suppose, as to why we became interested in the 5-step was after reading the variety and the vastness of different research that was published by AFNet UK at the time. And the experiences of family members that were described within that research was very similar to the experiences of the family members that we were working with. And essential to that was that there was a very non-pathologizing approach to that experience, and which was encapsulated very much in the stress strain coping support model that was developed. And then arising from that, when we looked further into the 5-step method, the intervention used with family members to support them through their experience, we also found it to be a very empowering approach, which was something we were very interested in and in working with family members in that way. And for us, there was a vast amount of family support already being provided in Ireland. We were in a very lucky position in that sense, both by workers within drug services and also by family members themselves as peer volunteers. But what perhaps was lacking at the time in Ireland was a structure to work with family members and a consistent approach in how we worked with family members. And that's why we felt the 5-step would be the perfect fit for us in Ireland. It would give that structure to workers and peer volunteers when working with family members, and would also promote consistency across the country in the type of service that was offered to family members living with drug and alcohol use. And also, I guess, the key aspect of the 5-step method was, for the first time, we were going to be able to use an evidence-based intervention where we could measure the impact and assess the impact of what good quality family support offered to family members. And that was, of massive interest to us as the National Family Support Network in Ireland.
That's great, Megan. So really it was about sort of reading the evidence base around 5-step, a non-judgmental approach that fitted with the experience of family members. And importantly, it gave you some consistency and structure and a quality system of how you were going to spread that across Ireland.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so moving on then to what actually happened then to develop the system.
I suppose from reading and doing our research and looking at all of the work that AFNet UK had done, we reached out to you guys and said, please help us. We would like to work with you. We would like to work in a collaborative way with you. I think we were very keen on the fact that 5-step method is such an empowering intervention for family members that we also wanted to bring the training and the rollout and the implementation of 5-step method in Ireland in an empowering way also. So we were very keen from the start that we would have a self-sustaining system, that we would have a self-sufficient system in Ireland. I know that when we approached you all, we were actually in the height of the recession here in Ireland. So we very much were in a position where we couldn't necessarily become dependent on external experts and having kind of trainers flying in and out of Ireland on a constant basis. So what we wanted and we approached you guys with was this kind of cascade model, where we would work with you to train people to become practitioners in the first instance, move on to become trainers, and then also move on to become assessors. Because we were keen on kind of having a self-sustaining and self-sufficient system. What we also wanted was to ensure a quality system. So we wanted to have quality control mechanisms in place. So in the sense that we wanted to ensure those we trained were faithful or to the model that they were using. So the 5-step method was being delivered to family members was of a very good quality. But we also wanted as well, kind of the fourth piece was to be able to participate and engage in some of that research that AFNet UK had already done and to look and see, well, yes, 5-step has been effective worldwide, but is it going to be as effective in Ireland? And so there was kind of different strands to how we wanted to bring 5-step method in. So first of all, to be self-sufficient, to have our own trainers and assessors, then to be self-sustaining so that we could then go on to ensure that the system would be here for a long period of time within Ireland, and that it wasn't dependent on one singular person spearheading it. And then also to ensure that the quality controls were in place, that people were using it accurately and effectively. And then also to be able to ensure that it was effective in Ireland and that we were having the same impact that 5-step was having worldwide in other countries.
That's great. So it sounds like the key things for you were, yes, the self-sufficiency, the self-sustaining, and you've proven that. It has carried on, and you are not dependent on, yes, flying people in and out, or having that continued expertise. You have become self-sufficient, and as you say, it's been used very effectively in a quality way.
Yeah, no, we've been really delighted with how the rollout and the implementation has gone. And I mean, I know AFNet UK were just amazingly cooperative in terms of what we were trying to achieve in Ireland. And when we went kind of to you guys with our plan and what our priorities were, you worked with us to ensure that we could make that happen, down to the development of the assessment criteria, for both practitioners and trainers. So it's really been a fantastic experience to have brought 5-step into Ireland and to have worked so closely with AFNet UK in that regard.
I say you were instrumental really in developing the accreditation system, of wanting to have this quality system, and from that, isn't it, we developed all the competencies for becoming a practitioner, assessor, and now a trainer. And it is impressive that Ireland, there's nearly 350 people trained in Ireland, and everybody we speak to, yes, seems to be very enthusiastic. And most importantly, your results from the family member questionnaire show a real improvement for family members.
Well, I think that's the magic of 5-step, because once you use it once with one family member and you see the help and the support that it can offer to a family member, you fall in love with it.
Okay, thank you, Megan. So I'll now move on to Fionnuala for her views and what's happened for 5-step since she's been the training officer.
So I started in the family support now about 5 months after I started. We went into lockdown. I luckily had been trained already in 5-step. It was one of my first roles as education and training and outreach officer. So when we went into lockdown, we had a few training events already scheduled. A couple of months into lockdown, realized we weren't going anywhere. So that's when we decided we needed to consider this as our new norm. And we approached AFANET and turned the training into an online training. We had a few rollouts of it, but worked quite closely with AFANET. And I think that was where the key was, that we were able to discuss all of our different thoughts. They were very open to considering how to rearrange some of the training materials, how to deliver it. So that was really instrumental. It didn't feel like we couldn't propose any new options for how to go forward with it. So we rolled it out, and that has been instrumental in how this is going forward and kind of all of the developments. So there was quite a few rotations of staff between Megan and I in the network. And what came to light was that other staff hadn't necessarily put together any standard operating procedures. So what I did when I started was put together standard operating procedures. So that way it wasn't reliant on me being there. And then if I left, I took all the knowledge with me. Every time you have to replicate knowledge through word of mouth or gather it through different sources, it gets diluted down. So we made very clear, concise, but very encompassing standard operating procedures about how to go forward, making sure that all of the different elements of it were included, so that if I went away or I moved on, I wasn't going to be leaving the network, and all the people that needed to be trained or wanted to be going through accreditation, they weren't going to be just left in the lurch. So that was where we kind of went with that. So all that was quite nicely tied in with the development of the online training. So then as a result of that, it's opened up an awful lot more avenues to increase our self-sufficiency. So what we have is increased access to all of the people that we want to train. People have just jumped on board with the online training. And what we found with this particular training is that people have enjoyed receiving this training by Zoom, and some elements of it even more than they did in the face-to-face. So for example, in the practical elements of the training, they've just absolutely loved the intimacy of the breakout rooms and just pairing up with people and working consistently with that person. It feels really true to a psychotherapy type kind of skills practice, which a lot of people have kind of compared it to in our trainings. So that was where it's opened up a range of different options for training, which the trainers have also jumped on board with, because it was dependent on the trainers being on board with this. So we're a very small charity. We run on a shoestring budget. We don't generate a lot of income from this. It just pays for itself. So that's how it becomes self-sufficient. So about being able to offer additional avenues for trainers to have a connection or to develop professionally, that has been appealing to them. So what going forward, what our plans are is to develop a trainers network and increase the accessibility of trainers, assessors, myself in the network, and to increase the support that's available for people on a very minimal budget. It's very low cost to the network because we're all working from home. We can all do it. We can, have meetings with people hundreds of miles away at the drop of a hat. So it's really opened up a whole world of options going online. So that has been really amazing for us.
Okay, thank you, Fionnuala. So that's been really interesting to hear, because I think at the start of this, we all kind of thought, oh, we can do the training on Zoom, but it won't be as good, or people will lose their interest. But actually, it has opened up a world of training that actually can include lots of different people, no travel costs, no hotel costs, etc. And you say the things that you thought might not work very well, like using Zoom breakout rooms and all of those kind of things, have actually proved to be an advantage. And actually, if you are a trainer one of the great things about breakout rooms is, of course, people stick to time.
Mm.
So that's a real benefit. So thank you very much for that. So I'd like to move on now to Pauline Stewart for what her experience has been about developing the system within her organisation working across New Zealand.
Thank you, Jill. We are small, again, charitable, not-for-profit organisation within New Zealand, nationwide. 2 years ago, had the vision to start to work with families. I looked all over the world for the best program that was possible, especially from a psychological point of view, because I'm a psychologist, and the 5-step program stood out head and tail above everything else. So we accepted that that was the program we were going to run. What we found is it's been amazing. The results have been amazing. Starting from zero and trying to get a hugely sustainable system in our organisation has not been a great problem, because once we getting the practitioners trained, we can actually pick out from that the practitioners who are going to be good assessors, the ones who are going to be good trainers, and we've been able to kind of target those people for training in the future. So it's a very sustainable program. The big thing for New Zealand was it had to be 100% culturally appropriate. We can't have anything that isn't culturally appropriate in New Zealand. And the interesting thing is that we have now got Māori practitioners, we have Māori families coming on, and that's a very big thing for any organisation. And we try to have very good supervision while people are training as practitioners, supervision as soon as they're right through. We have Zoom conferences so the practitioners can get together. And what we have found is it's really, really important to get, once people have trained, we're doing all the training actually person to person, but we can do it. We do other training on Zoom, so we can absolutely do that too. That's no problem, and especially in a country like New Zealand where it's very spread out, we need that facility to do Zoom training. What we found is that people who come onto the program and do the 5-step training, do the 5-step themselves, often want to do the 5-step training after they've moved through their own program. So that's been a great advantage to us, because we've got some amazing people come on as trainers. We have quite a very high standard before people can come on to do the training, and that served us very well. And we do find that as soon as during the training for practitioners, and as soon as the people have finished the training, we insist that they do the accreditation straight away. 1 week ago, we did 2 weeks ago, we did training. 3/4 of those people are now in accreditation, and we find that you get a lot more buy-in for accreditation if you get people going on with a family member straight away recording. And there's just so much advantage of having people recording. So basically we want the best program, we want a sustainable program, we want a culturally appropriate program, and we are absolutely delighted in New Zealand to be using this program in our organisation.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. And I think Pauline's an example of what I talk about in our preceding presentation about this area. A key champion at the centre of the organisation who can infuse others around the programme. And I think it's a very good point you made, Pauline, about it being culturally appropriate. Because I remember we took a lot of time to ensure that it was and it could be adapted, and a lot of advice. So it's good to hear that it has been, and that you're now rolling it out. So thank you, Pauline. So I'd like to now move on to Anita and their experience in Jelinek.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, to start with the end, is that we now have a very valuable addition to our programs we have at Jelinek. And thanks to Jill to have this patience to support us, because it took a while. We started in 2018, and we had contact with Affinet, and we were starting with traineeship, and before that we had to translate all the materials. And so we started very enthusiastic and decided to form a fast track group, like with 3 people who were the first to be assessed and practitioner, and further on being assessed to assessors. And but then came the part that we had to find out that once people were starting as a practitioner to use the 5-step method, there was a gap between their experience and someone who to assess their steps. And so I was the first who was certificated, and there was a gap between the people I could start assessing. So we advise people just to, don't try to speed, just follow the steps in this process, which was partly, maybe mainly due to transcription of all the materials and the tapes, because we did the sessions in Dutch. And to assess them, they had to be transcribed to English. So that was a very, very expensive, and it costed us a lot of time too. So yeah, to take in consideration that it can be quite in an investment. We had a coordinator, which is a good advice, I think, because we had to be freed of all those paperwork, and so we had a very good coordinator. A lack of that was that the sheets of assessment were not translated yet. So as soon as I became an assessor, I noticed that the way I assessed was not in my expectation. So there was a gap between how to assess, and so I did a lot of things wrong in there, because we didn't translate it correct. We thought we could have translated the assessment sheets ourselves, because it's not too big. But there was a lot of things lost in translation. So that was we have to take in consideration that the assessment in itself is a very intense procedure, and you have to follow the steps in that, and don't take a shortcut. That's we thought we could have speed there a bit. It's very good to keep in line with Affinet, which was a wonderful experience, because we were trained so well by Megan and Robert, and we were so enthusiastic. But along the way, with doing the meetings with the family members, that was a good process in as an assessor. That was beautiful. It is also good to think about how you implement your this program in your own organization. So what is the position, the place between other programs you have? So that's we are very proud to have it now all around. We started with individual programs and groups, and now MS Teams, and on MS Teams we have good experience too. Mm-hmm. And on groups, people have this benefit of seeing each other and feeling seen by other people who have the same experience. That's a great value too.
They sound really positive, Anita. So one of the keys, I think, for your organisation was the fast tracking of people. We had the issue of the language problem and the translation. I mean, there are various now computer programs that translate, but that can all be quite tricky because things can be lost in translation. So our decision was to train yourself and Wendy to become accredited practitioners very quickly, and then move on to be the assessors. So I think for you, isn't it, you are now well on your way to having a self-sufficient model. But there was the challenge, yes, of the language. So you're saying, yes, go slowly, make sure you've got everything in place, because translating everything takes time. So they were some of the key things.
Yeah, one of the things to know if you're another country and not English is your own language, is that we delivered all the 5 steps at once to be transcripted. And that's where you cannot learn to bring further processing in the next step. So that was a restriction for ourselves. We couldn't learn from our tapes because we delivered this just once at a time.
Yes, that's a key point, that really people absolutely need the feedback on the first step before they go on to the second one.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And we'll come.
Other thing, and I find it quite well. What I heard, Megan said it too, Megan, that with 2 people we are now assessed. Wendy and I are assessed, but it's very vulnerable, just 2 people. So I suggest we should have more people to become assessors.
Yes, you need that cohort, don't you, to make sure that it doesn't all fall apart if people, leave their jobs, other things happen. So that's a useful point. Okay, thank you very much. And moving on to Lorna.
Hi, thanks, Jill. So as you said, Jill, I've been working with Turning Point, a national organisation, a large national organisation across England. I've been working with them for about 10 years. And you mentioned Jan, the head of psychology, and she's been instrumental at Turning Point for all that's been going on. And in fact, actually, Richard Velleman and I had worked previously with Jan when we were both working for the NHS as part of introducing 5-step into the statutory drug and alcohol services. So there was history there. And so Jan was clear that they wanted to introduce an evidence-based intervention for family work to Turning Point. And I think a clear part of the learning is that implementation of 5-step is about so much more than just training the practitioners to use the intervention. I think the others have already alluded to that. There's so much to think about at all levels of the organisation, and buy-in support is needed at all kind of levels, and that has its advantages for an organisation like kind of Turning Point, but also because of its size and national reach has not been without its challenges. But what are some of the many things that Turning Point's kind of done? So first of all, they work out the best fit for 5-step within each of its services and the geographical area where that service sits. For example, ensuring it can sit alongside any existing kind of grassroots initiatives and other carers services. And next, whilst many or all of the practitioners at a service can be trained, actually what's become more of the norm is to employ dedicated family workers who can support families and can be trained to use a range of interventions, including 5-step. And additionally, the introduction of 5-step at Turning Point services is supported by a range of other things. And I think the surrounding framework is equally important to having the practitioners trained to use, the intervention. If you don't have that kind of buy-in and that kind of framework, it's going to be very hard to get to a self-sufficient, self-sustaining system. So the surrounding framework at kind of Turning Point includes regular and dedicated supervision, and indeed kind of many of those who provide the supervision themselves attend training. There are family worker forums, kind of getting feedback from family members themselves, sometimes having a family lead at a service, and administrative and governance systems. The kind of latter are important. They're hard at a national organisation like Turning Point, and those systems need to be regularly reviewed and reinforced, and they include being able to record the work and to be able to record collate, analyse and so on the FMQ data. And finally, really, there's been more increasing flexibility in the way that Turning Point works with family members, including 5-step, and partly, but not kind of wholly, because of the impact of COVID. And this has included telephone, online, and community support, and also in recent months, kind of moving the training online. And actually, similar to what some of the others have said, actually finding that the training can work kind of just as well. And actually the skill practice, which you go into this thinking is going to be the hardest bit, actually can end up being the most powerful part of online training. So I think overall, Turning Point is a leading example in the UK of embedding kind of family support within substance use treatment services, and 5-step is a really important part of this, and it's a really important part of what Turning Point does and what it does for families.
Great, thank you, Lorna.
Okay.
So the importance there, stressing about, yes, the buy-in to the model across the organisation and having the right framework in place to support 5-step, from supervision, forums, admin and governance systems. And you say the change in the way training is developed also for Turning Point has been a positive. So thank you for that, Lorna. I'd now just like to ask each of our speakers, our panel, to talk about, they've already given some positives, but just any more tips about positives for the organisation, but most importantly, any challenges that there have been. So back to Megan to find out from her any more tips about what was positive, but also really focusing on what some of the challenges were for Ireland and how you overcame those.
Well, as a lot of people have said or mentioned already, I mean, there was definitely an increase in skills and confidence amongst workers and drug services delivering family support, and also amongst our peer volunteers in the family support groups after having received training in the 5-step method. There was certainly greater consistency across the country as to what was being offered to family members and the experience of family members presenting at services. And we definitely had that capacity to assess and monitor the work that was being delivered in Ireland. I think one of the other key successes for us was the support that we received from the government departments in relation to our rollout and implementation. And so much so that they actually went on to name 5-step method as a key intervention to be delivered to family members within the Irish National Drug Strategy. So that was very helpful and supportive to us in our rollout and implementation of the 5-step method. Other kind of, I suppose, incentives as well for people to participate in the training and to come forward for accreditation was in terms of getting CPD, continuous professional development points, linked to our delivery of training of the 5-step method in Ireland. So it was an incentive, I guess, for employers and employees to come forward and complete the training. There are challenges in the delivery of 5-step method. We're lucky in Ireland in that we're a small country and we're also a national organisation. So it was very helpful to be kind of the national lead or the coordinating body for 5-step method delivery in Ireland. But some of the challenges, I mean, Fionnuala mentioned it earlier, it's a small, while we're a national organisation, it's a small organisation, often operating on a shoestring budget. So some of the challenges were, 5-step method does come with an administrative aspect to it, especially when you are trying to maintain databases of those who've come forward for training, those who are going forward for accreditation, those who've completed their accreditation. And there's also a post-training bit that we definitely found in the National Family Support Network, where people need that mentoring support after the training to come forward, and coaching to come forward for the accreditation. So there's sort of an administrative burden and a mentoring or support kind of aspect to it as well when you're rolling it out. That I definitely think. One of the other challenges is getting people to submit their tapes, their audio recordings. And as Pauline said, we certainly found over time, one of the key aspects was the minute you've done your training, get out there, get recording, get submitting, because the longer people left it, the less likely it was that they would come forward for accreditation. And also to help us with that, we also introduced a sort of non-refundable bit. So people would pay for their accreditation up front. And if they didn't submit their tapes, we would not refund it. just as an incentive and as a support to employers and employees to get the tapes in. And I guess the other side of it is, we mentioned shoestring budgets and things like that before. We were lucky in that we received kind of philanthropic funding in order to try to roll out and implement 5-step methods. And obviously workers and things were funded from statutory departments within the Irish government, but we operated it very much on a shoestring budget. We wanted it to be accessible. We wanted it to be affordable. It was subsidized training that we were offering. But all of those things are difficult to sustain, because a lot of the time you're relying on goodwill. You're relying potentially on the goodwill of trainers or the organizations that the trainers are working for to release them to deliver the training. You're relying on goodwill for venues to be, you know, very low cost. You're providing your own teas and coffees. You're going around the country with backpacks of burkas and tea bags and coffee jars, just to try and make things as affordable and accessible as possible. But that brings its own challenges as well.
Okay, thank you. So I think some of the things you're saying there, yes, you know, there were some considerable challenges. You really do need to have some good administrative things in place. There is a lot of time involved, and you know, I know it took up a lot of your time in terms of setting up all those things, and the mentoring and coaching of people being vital. And as you've said, yes, getting those tapes in, if people wish to be accredited, there really does need to be support and encouragement for that. And there is a funding issue, yes, around the non-refundable parts of the accreditation, and a lot of goodwill and creativity running on a shoestring budget. So thank you for that, Megan. So moving on to Fionnuala for the current challenges.
Yeah, so I think I'll probably lead on from where Megan left off, because a lot of those challenges are still relevant, but we've actually found that the world going more digital has resolved a lot of those issues. So that's quite a positive. I can't believe I'm saying there's a positive to COVID, but there we are. So with the FMQs, it's always been an issue getting back FMQs, because you're relying on the practitioner to physically send it in. Then it becomes down to the budget of who has to pay for postage. So things going digital has increased people's ability to send them in. We spend more time during the training going through the relevance of the FMQ, how it can be used, not just as a psychometric tool, but how it will actually garner so much more information for a practitioner for working with their client generally. So that by focusing a lot more on the FMQ, the relevance of the FMQ during the training, we've seen that people are much more interested and realize that this is a tool that will benefit them as a practitioner, and it's not just something that we're asking them to fill in as a goodwill thing. We're also getting managers buy in a lot more. We have to make sure that they understand exactly what they're allowing or sending their staff off to do. We have to make sure that they understand that once you send your staff member for this training, it's very cost effective, but there needs to be a commitment from the organization to support them into their accreditation. So with the access to me more frequent through Zoom, it's meant that I can support individual practitioners who've come on the training where they might be stuck on a certain element of the accreditation process. So I can physically show them how to use Dropbox. We've got people coming from a range of different kind of confidence levels with computers, and actually people are using Zoom and WhatsApp and that to support clients during lockdown periods. And that's meant that it's actually much easier for them to record sessions. So like other people have mentioned, getting people to record sessions from the start, even if they never use them, that's always been something that we've really promoted. Just get over the whole concept of being recorded, and it makes you a better practitioner. The other thing around the accreditation is in putting a deadline. So we have a 6-month deadline for a submission of all tapes, but that doesn't mean that it's completely out of the water, and we hold the right to kind of extend those deadlines for individuals. So for example, we've some people that are coming forward who are really committed and we're working with them really closely. And so we'll extend the deadline, but it does provide that incentive. If it's endless, people just put it on the long finger and it never gets done. One thing that we have found about getting trainers to commit to the training is by approaching family support coordinators that are based in statutory services. So our local drug and alcohol task forces. So getting them involved in becoming trainers. So we have a really good model set up in one of the areas in the country where the coordinator is a trainer and getting on her way to become an assessor. So we can get her time for free where she can deliver this during her work hours, and we can offer her a certain number of places on that training for her staff in her catchment area. So that way we're achieving the buy-in from the organisation, because the incentive is instantly there for them to support people through the accreditation process. We've got access to a trainer, and it also helps to spread the word amongst all the other task forces that this is a very good intervention for them to be rolling out. We're moving into a much more tighter economic period, and therefore it's a relatively new concept in Ireland, I think, the whole moving towards payment by results and kind of really demonstrating how effective this is and how cost effective it is. So by adding this to the suite of training that they can do to demonstrate how easy it is to become trained in it, how the accreditation process might look daunting, but it actually isn't when you start doing it, and the level of support and access to ongoing support, which comes as part of the training package, has really helped to increase the interest. And since we've started running training on Zoom through different interest groups, so we've delivered it to a traveller visibility group down in a certain area in Ireland. As they're coming forward through Zoom, what we found is they are much more engaged in the accreditation process. So we've seen much more people coming through the accreditation process while going virtual. So that's been a huge benefit. And the other part about running it on a shoestring budget is that we offer a suite of training. So 5-step is our main one that we kind of really are focusing on over the last while. However, we have other interventions, which other people have mentioned, like Turning Point, where it can be used as a package. So while 5-step does pretty much benefit everyone, there's other aspects too. So we might have programs for child-to-parent violence or for young people. So that's where it kind of it allows different funding streams to come in through different areas. So offering it as a suite and coordinating and hosting training as opposed to necessarily going out and delivering training, that's what's made it much more sustainable for our charity, just because we're so small.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear about all those developments, and the power of Zoom, the power of the support, practical things about getting people used to recording, and this integrated approach to a suite of delivery of training programs. So that's really interesting. Thank you very much, Fionnuala. So moving on to Pauline for any other tips and challenges.
Thank you, Jill. Family Drug Support Aotearoa New Zealand is a volunteer organisation, so that has huge implications when you come to running the best program in the world, really. All our practitioners are volunteers, and so recruiting is very important to make sure that our recruiting is really good. We offer the training free to for people who are training, and all the assessment is free. And in response to that, we have a contract that asks that they will work with at least 2 family members per 3 months over at least 2 years. So they're getting a very good training for a really good price, and but they're expected to pay that back through the work they do as volunteers. There is some reimbursement, especially when they're on Zoom, because 75% of the family members we're working with now since COVID are doing the family member program online. We're very focused on getting an evaluation of the family member program. So at the end of the 5 steps, we make sure that the family member gives an evaluation of the whole program, and that's sent out from the office. We are very focused on getting the pre-family member questionnaire, the post-family member questionnaire, and the 3-month family member questionnaire all in, so that we can do really good analysis of the data. We're really keen to, and it's a challenge that we're working with on the fidelity of the program. So we want to make sure that every practitioner, accredited practitioner, we only allow accredited practitioners to work with people, with family members once they're trained. And we make sure, because for the fidelity of the program, we're always trying to see what's best practice and actually having good conversations and really, really good supervision that's available for the people who are providing the family member program online. So those are some of the things that are both challenges, but we've been working through them, and we're just absolutely thrilled with the standard that's being that we're able to achieve with that.
Okay, thank you, Pauline, very much for that. And moving on to Anita.
Well, what was very challenging was that all of us were struggling with the risk management. And so it was a great elaboration of ourselves that we were able to draw up a management plan, a risk management plan. So there was a benefit from this whole process. And another thing is that we started to have a contact with a researcher, so we can deliver them now already a lot of FMQs. So there was a system made to let them be analyzed. So that was a successful start already. Another thing we are proud of is the handbook we have. We've got a lovely handbook, and which a lot of family members found very, very helpful. And it's very good to structure your sessions. And when we call them back after with the family member questionnaires, I'll get my book with it. And then so it does remember them that after 6 weeks that it's very useful to call them again. Because it brings up what they learned and what they intention to do. Another thing is what we also have found very helpful, that Wendy and I did the assessments with our practitioners, and the self-assessments from them were very helpful, because it gave them so much inside information from how they are actually doing the assessments. We're very proud to have this program on the website, and that we are, I think, 3,000 people at Jelinek. So we have to get other people informed about our program. So we're only one section prevention, and we're glad that is a nice in line with the other programs. And we've got a telephone services, and we have to inform them where to find us, what it is, how to put it on the website, and what they can tell, what they don't tell about the program. Because there's a difference between CRAFT, another program which tries to help people to get onto an addiction program. And this is really, the difference is that there's never wrong or right. We have to tell everybody that this is not about trying to manipulate somebody to go to an addiction treatment. So that was very, a new idea. And I think we are preparing now to train other addiction center in Holland. That's the next move. So we're already about to go there. But we were only assessors when he became. I don't know. I haven't heard of her. Is she already certificated? So, but we. It was a long process from 2018 until 2021. Now it's about almost 3 years. So take that in consideration.
Okay, so that's really helpful to hear about the kind of the positive moves and some of those extra tips that Holland and Jelinek have been involved with. So thank you, Anita. And finally, moving on to Lorna.
Great, thanks, Jill. So perhaps thinking about some of the positives for Turning Point first. And I think there's a number that come to mind. Firstly, I think, as has already been mentioned, is this idea of having a champion and someone who's really going to advocate for 5-step and be a lead, though kind of obviously there is a risk to that being just one person, but it's certainly been a positive to have that lead at Turning Point. I think also really only wanting to use evidence-based interventions, and so choosing and wanting to have 5-step as one of the evidence-based options for families, and as part of that wanting to work kind of with us and understanding the importance of continuing to build the evidence base and having the research framework around what's going on. And I think also looking to expand what the organisation does to support families, such as the introduction of family worker posts and family leads, as I mentioned earlier. And more recent initiatives have included piloting a digital version of 5-step, and as I said, moving the training to be delivered online. I think inevitably there have been challenges along the way. I think obviously some of the things that are going on at Turning Point have taken a number of years and some are still ongoing. And I think that's a really important point for services and organisations and countries to bear in mind, is to be prepared to be in this for the long haul. The investment up front is really worth it in the long term, but you've really got to be prepared to be patient. The kind of organisational kind of culture change isn't going to happen like overnight, but some of the challenges that Turning Point have had, all of which are overcomable, have been wanting to introduce 5-step across a national organisation, encouraging practitioners to come forward for accreditation, collecting and collating FMQ data, embedding supervision, and ensuring that there's the required buy-in and support. And I guess actually a further challenge which applies across the UK and not just to Turning Point has been to increase the focus on kind of family work when stretched resources and internal and external policy and practice pressures mean that substance use treatment services can really struggle to develop and embed family work to the degree that they want to, because often the focus is still so much to really only focus and to prioritise work with the alcohol and drug or gambling using clients. But I think overall, if a service or organisation can recognise the potential for having dedicated and evidence-based family support embedded as part of its work, including something like 5-step, and is willing to take on the kind of challenges that we've all outlined and see them as part of the process and an inevitable, useful, constructive part of the process, then I think there can really only be added value for substance use treatment services and ultimately for the families as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorna. So I think it's been interesting hearing, actually there's a lot of similarities coming out across all these different organisations. That's been fascinating to hear about. So I hope it's going to give everybody some examples of the self-sufficient model. And also I think there are plenty of tips and hints about how to go forward, taking the time, embedding the systems and the value actually of the technology now on Zoom training and the ability to support those practitioners as part of delivering services and having integrated care. So I just want to thank everybody today for taking part. So thank you very much. So just to pick out a couple of key points from our panel discussion. So what our members of the panel said, it was very adaptable to fit the needs of the organisation and country. Everybody's different, and it was important for it to be adapted culturally to ensure the fit. And one of the reasons it was very attractive to many, and Ireland particularly said this, was it was a non-pathologising approach. There was a good evidence base, and it was empowering for the family member. And you could also measure the impact of the evidence, and there was a very good quality control system for 5-step. It can also be included as part of a range of programmes which Turning Point has done and Lorna emphasised. It was vital to have a good standard operating procedures to make sure that everybody knows what's happening and things can run smoothly. And one of the main points our panel made is it's been adapted to deliver this on Zoom very successfully. In thinking about this for your organisation, it's really useful to pick out from the practitioners who will actually be good as assessors and trainers, because these are different competencies required for these skills. It was emphasised that supervision has been key and making sure that people are supported through the accreditation process and getting people used to recording. Do set some deadlines for the accreditation, but that needs to be flexible. And it does take a lot of time to do, and especially as in the example for Holland, that materials need translating. But again, things have speeded up on the translation front with IT software that has really improved. You can also fast track people to become practitioners and assessors at the same time, and that's been done very successfully. It's vital to think about all levels of the organisation to have buy-in, the framework it operates in, the governance frameworks, the contracts, and your risk management procedures. So quite a number of things to think about. And some organisations have dedicated family workers and methods of working. And again, things have changed, especially with Zoom and digital versions for families. And everybody emphasised the investment up front is worthwhile for the long-term gain. So I hope that's given you tips and hints from a range of organisations involved in the successful implementation of the 5-step method. So thank you very much to everybody involved in the production of this video.